Hello friends. I can see 80% of my viewers don't subscribe while watching videos. Please hit the subscribe button and like this video. Press that bell icon for notifications. And tell me in the comments from which city you are watching this video. My name is Sabrina Cole, and the day they told me I could not compete with men was the day I decided to destroy every single one of their expectations. Let me take you back to that moment. That moment when my world shattered into a million razor-sharp pieces. When I first laced up my running shoes, it was not about glory. It was not about recognition. It was not even about winning. It was about breathing. You see, running was my oxygen when life tried to suffocate me. Every stride cleared the fog from my mind. Every heartbeat silenced the voices that whispered I was not enough. Every mile gave me the strength to face another day in a world that seemed determined to crush my spirit. But everything changed when I made one simple decision. I signed up for the City Marathon, the biggest racing event of the year. Thousands of participants, television coverage, prize money that could change lives. And that is when the laughter started. Not gentle chuckles, not playful teasing, cruel, cutting, soul-destroying laughter. You will never keep up with the men. One guy scoffed at the registration desk, his voice dripping with condescension. His friends nodded in agreement, like they were witnessing some cosmic joke unfolding before their eyes. Stick to fun runs, another one smirked, his eyes scanning me from head to toe like I was some amusing curiosity that had wandered into the wrong place. This is not a game, sweetheart. The word sweetheart hit me like a physical blow, but it did not stop there. Even some women shook their heads at me with pity in their eyes. It is not worth the humiliation, Sabrina, one whispered, her voice heavy with what she thought was kindness. These men have been training for years. You will embarrass yourself. Their words felt like daggers, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. But here is what they did not understand. Humiliation was not what I feared. Living small was what terrified me. Being boxed in by their narrow expectations. Accepting their limited vision of what I could become. That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face was flushed with anger. My hands were trembling with rage. But behind the fury, I saw something else. Determination. Pure, unfiltered, unstoppable determination. I made a promise to that woman in the mirror. A promise that would change everything. For the next 6 months, I would train like my life depended on it. Because in many ways it did. Dawn became my closest companion. While the city slept, I ran. Through empty streets bathed in the pale light of street lamps. Past closed shops and silent intersections. My breath created clouds in the cold morning air, as my feet found their rhythm on the pavement. Miles before sunrise became my ritual. 5 miles became 10. 10 became 15. 15 became 20. My alarm clock screamed at 4:30 every morning. My body screamed even louder. But I refused to listen to either of them. Hills became my enemies and my teachers. I found the steepest inclines in the city and I conquered them. Again and again until my legs shook like leaves in a hurricane. Until my lungs burned like fire. Until every muscle fiber in my body begged for mercy. But mercy was a luxury I could not afford. I studied endurance like it was sacred scripture. Books on running mechanics. Articles on nutrition, videos on breathing techniques. I absorbed every piece of information like a sponge desperate for water. I learned about lactate threshold and VO2 max. About carb loading and hydration strategies. About the mental game that separates champions from casualties. Knowledge became my weapon. I pushed myself past every wall my body tried to build. When my legs felt like concrete, I ran faster. When my chest felt like it was on fire, I ran longer. When every instinct told me to quit, I found another gear I did not know existed. I ran in rainstorms that soaked me to the bone. Thunder crashed overhead like the sound of breaking worlds. Lightning split the sky into jagged pieces of light. Water streamed down my face, mixing sweat and rain into a cocktail of determination. Other runners sought shelter. I ran harder. I ran in icy wind that cut through my skin like broken glass. Winter mornings that made every breath feel like swallowing razor blades. Temperatures that turned my water bottle into a block of ice. Conditions that would have kept most people locked safely indoors. But I was not most people. I ran with blisters that ripped open my skin. Painful bleeding wounds that made every step feel like walking on hot coals. I taped them up and kept going. I bought better shoes and logged more miles. I treated my feet like battle scars and wore them with pride. Pain became my teacher. 6 months of this. 6 months of pre-dawn training sessions. 6 months of pushing my body beyond what I thought was possible. 6 months of rebuilding myself from the ground up. And then the day arrived. Marathon day. The morning air was crisp and electric with anticipation. Thousands of runners gathered at the starting line, their nervous energy creating an almost visible buzz in the atmosphere. The men crowded at the front of the pack. They wore their confidence like armor. Their expensive running gear gleamed in the early sunlight. Their conversations were loud and boastful, filled with talk of personal records and finishing times. And then they saw me. The jokes started flying like daggers aimed at my heart. "Try to keep up," one called out, his voice carrying across the crowd like a challenge. "Do not faint," another shouted, earning laughs from his companions. "There is no shame in quitting," a third added, his tone dripping with mock encouragement. They expected me to respond, to defend myself, to shrink under the weight of their mockery. Instead, I did something that surprised them. I stayed silent. I closed my eyes and felt the rhythm of my heartbeat. I took deep breaths and centered my mind. I visualized the finish line, and the moment I would cross it. Because here is what they did not understand. I had not trained my mouth for 6 months. I had trained my legs. The starting gun fired with a crack that shattered the morning silence. And I ran. Not fast. Not slow. But steady. Like a river cutting through stone. I found my pace and held it. While others sprinted out of the gate like their hair was on fire, I maintained the rhythm I had practiced thousands of times. Mile after mile, I stayed consistent. The pack around me began to thin. Runners who had started too fast were already paying the price. Their breathing became labored. Their strides became choppy. Their confidence began to crack. But not mine. The cocky voices that had taunted me at the starting line began to fade behind me. By mile 10, I was no longer listening to their jokes. I was watching their backs as I passed them one by one. By mile 15, the doubt in their eyes was unmistakable. They had expected to leave me in their dust within the first few miles. Instead, they were watching me pull away with each passing kilometer. Mile 20 arrived like a moment of truth. This is where marathons are won or lost. Where months of training either pay off or fall apart. Where the human spirit is tested in its purest form. And that is when everything changed. It was not me struggling to keep up anymore. It was them. Their perfect strides began to falter. Their confident postures crumbled. Their steady breathing became ragged gasps that sounded like dying engines. They had hit the wall. But I found another gear. Something I had discovered in those pre-dawn training sessions. Something I had forged in the furnace of countless hills and endless miles. Something that had been waiting inside me for exactly this moment. I accelerated. Not just physically but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Every doubt they had planted in my mind became fuel for my fire. Every mocking comment became energy for my muscles. Every moment they had tried to make me feel small became power that propelled me forward. The final 6 miles were a blur of pure determination. Spectators lined the streets, their cheers growing louder as they realized something extraordinary was happening. Cameras flashed. Reporters scrambled for position. The energy in the air became electric. Because a story was being written. A story that no one had seen coming. The finish line appeared in the distance like a beacon of vindication. 200 meters. 100 meters. 50 meters. And then I crossed it. The announcer's voice cracked through the loudspeakers, his disbelief evident in every word. The winner is Sabrina Cole. For a moment, the world went completely silent. Time seemed suspended in disbelief. Thousands of people trying to process what they had just witnessed. A reality that did not fit their expectations. And then the silence erupted into thunderous applause. Wave after wave of cheering that washed over me like a tsunami of validation. People on their feet, clapping until their hands were raw. Strangers hugging each other like they had witnessed something miraculous. Because they had. Reporters materialized around me like magic. Microphones thrust toward my face. Camera flashes creating a strobe light effect that made the world seem surreal. Questions fired at me from every direction. How does it feel to win? What was your strategy? Did you expect this outcome? But I could barely hear them over the sound of my own heartbeat. I just smiled. Sweat streaming down my face like rivers of triumph. Chest heaving with the rhythm of victory. Heart pounding with the beat of vindication. Because I had not just finished the race. I had not just won the race. I had rewritten the entire story. Later, as the chaos began to settle, I found myself at the water station. That is when I saw him. One of the men who had mocked me at registration. The one who had told me to stick to fun runs. The one whose smirk had cut me so deeply 6 months ago. Now he stood in line for water, staring at me like I was some impossible equation he could not solve. His confidence was gone. His arrogance had evaporated. In its place was something I had never seen in his eyes before. Respect. He approached me slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal they were not sure they could trust. I did not think you could do it, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air between us like a confession. I looked him directly in the eye. No anger. No bitterness. No need for revenge. Just truth. That is exactly why I did. I said, my voice steady and clear. And in that moment, I saw something shift in his expression. Understanding. The realization that his doubt had not weakened me. It had made me stronger. As I walked away from that conversation, something profound settled in my chest. This victory was not just mine. It belonged to every woman who had ever been told she was too weak, too slow, too fragile, too limited by her gender to achieve greatness. I had carried them all across that finish line with me. Every girl who had been discouraged from trying sports. Every woman who had been passed over for promotion because she was seen as less capable. Every female athlete who had been paid less than her male counterparts despite equal or superior performance. They were all there in my footsteps. Their dreams were woven into my stride. Their hopes were pumped through my heartbeat. Their strength was channeled through my muscles. The metal around my neck was heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. Proof that limitations are often just illusions. That barriers exist mainly in our minds. That the only person who can truly define our capabilities is ourselves. The prize money would help with bills and expenses. But the real prize was something money could never buy. The knowledge that I had refused to accept someone else's definition of my worth. That night, I sat in my apartment with the medal in my hands. The same apartment where 6 months earlier I had stared at myself in the bathroom mirror and made a promise. The same mirror that now reflected a different person entirely. Not just physically stronger, though I certainly was that, but mentally transformed, emotionally evolved, spiritually awakened to possibilities I had never dared to imagine. The woman looking back at me had learned something crucial. The most dangerous moment in any person's life is when they start believing other people's limitations are their own truth. The most powerful moment is when they decide to prove those limitations wrong. My phone buzzed with messages of congratulations. Friends and family who had watched the race on television. Strangers who had been inspired by the story. Young girls whose mothers had shown them that anything was possible. But there was one message that stopped me cold. It was from a 12-year-old girl named Maya. Dear Sabrina, it read. My coach told me I should not try out for the boys' track team, because I would just embarrass myself. But after watching you run today, I think I am going to try anyway. Thank you for showing me that impossible is just someone else's opinion. I stared at that message until tears blurred my vision. Because that is when I truly understood what had happened. The marathon had not been about beating the men. It had been about beating the limitations. Not just my own, but the ones that society tries to place on all of us. The ones that tell us we are not fast enough, strong enough, good enough to pursue our dreams. The ones that whisper we should stay in our lane, know our place, accept our designated role. Those limitations had been my real opponent. And I had destroyed them completely. The weeks that followed brought interview requests and speaking opportunities. Magazines wanted my training secrets. Television shows wanted my inspirational story. Companies wanted me to endorse their products. But what I wanted was simpler. I wanted to keep running. Not because I had to prove anything anymore, but because I had discovered who I truly was in those pre-dawn miles. In those hill repeats that made my legs scream. In those moments when quitting seemed like the only logical option. I had found my authentic self on the road. The version of me that existed when no one was watching. When no one was judging. When the only voice that mattered was the one inside my own head telling me to keep going. That voice had been right. 6 months later, I received another invitation. The Boston Marathon. One of the most prestigious races in the world. An event that requires qualifying times just to participate. Some of the same men who had doubted me were also invited. This time, there was no laughter at registration. No mocking comments. No condescending smirks. Just acknowledgement. The kind of respect that can only be earned through performance. As I pinned my race number to my shirt, one of them approached me. Not the one who had spoken to me after my victory. A different one. Someone whose voice had been among the loudest in predicting my failure. "Good luck out there," he said simply. No jokes. No qualifications. No hidden barbs. Just genuine respect from one competitor to another. I smiled and nodded. "Thank you," I replied. "You too." Because that is what growth looks like. Not the dramatic moment of victory, but the quiet acknowledgement that comes after. The slow shift in perspective that happens when people are forced to confront their own biases. The recognition that strength comes in forms they had never expected. As I lined up at that starting line in Boston, surrounded by some of the fastest marathon runners in the world, I felt something different. Peace. Not the desperate need to prove myself that had driven me 6 months earlier, but the calm confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you are capable of achieving. The gun fired, and I ran. Not to show anyone else what I could do, but to show myself what was still possible. Because here is what I learned on that first marathon course. The race is never really against other people. The race is always against the voice in your head that tells you to quit. Against the limitations that others try to place on your dreams. Against the fear that whispers you are not enough. And every time you refuse to stop, every time you push through one more mile, every time you choose to keep going when every logical part of your brain is screaming for you to give up, you win. Not just the race. You win yourself back. You reclaim your power from everyone who tried to convince you it did not exist. You discover that the only permission you ever needed to be extraordinary was your own. My name is Sabrina Cole, and they said I could not compete with men. So I ran the marathon, and I beat them all. But more importantly, I beat every limitation they tried to place on my life. And if you have ever been told that your dreams are too big, your goals too ambitious, your aspirations too unrealistic, remember my story. Remember that impossible is just someone else's opinion. And opinions can be changed. One stride at a time. If this story inspired you to chase your own impossible dreams, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Your subscription helps us share these powerful messages of hope and determination with others who need to hear them. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you never miss a story that could change your life.